Just as a reminder, we'll be recording this webinar and making it available through YouTube. You should get a link to that recording and to any resources that we mention here via email to everyone that registered, and that will also likely be posted on the Atlanta History Center page. I've gone ahead and we've muted everyone, and we're going to ask that you remain muted until we enter the time for questions. If you have questions or technical issues, please let us know using the chat feature so we can address it. Kennedy and Leah are able to help with that. So just you can message them, or you can just post it into the chat box. If you haven't already, I encourage you to open it up the chat feature and share where you're watching from, or any other questions that you have as we go through this. I'm Erica Haig, the collections manager here at the Atlanta History Center. I'm one of the team of this staff for the team that has worked to put together the Corona Collective web portal. If you haven't checked out our Corona Collective blog post yet, I encourage you to check it out, and Leah will be dropping a link to that into the chat so you can. The Corona Collective grew out of the collection staff at the Atlanta History Center wanting to document how people around Atlanta were dealing with and addressing issues that came up during all of the turbulent times that we've been having over the past six months or so. Since the initial organization and push for people to share their stories, photos, and videos, we felt the need to expand this project to ensure that we were able to include the global reckoning with racial violence and inequity. The Atlanta History Center is collecting materials and stories that illustrate how people are experiencing and responding to all aspects of life in Atlanta during this time. This is part of a larger effort by archivists, oral historians, and public historians across the country and across the world to document this time. We hope that by helping communities across Atlanta tell their stories about how their lives and communities have changed over the past 6 months, we'll be able to record for the future more about how this moment has impacted people. And we can't do that without people like you, right? We want you to get involved, and we really are hoping that you all can help us really document this time. Today you're going to be hearing about the physically distant oral history arm of this effort. We have partnered with StoryCorps Atlanta to record stories and reflections in order to document this moment for individuals, neighborhoods, organizations, city at large, and anything in between. Daniel Garcia, the regional manager for StoryCorps Atlanta, will first walk us through what StoryCorps is, the 3 main ways that you can record and share oral histories, the StoryCorps community portal, and what donating an oral history through StoryCorps means. Then we're going to have Sue Verhoff, the Director of Oral History and Genealogy at the Atlanta History Center, talk a little bit about what we hope that you might be able to share with us and next steps if you'd like to get involved. Again, anytime if you have questions, please drop those into the chat box or into the questions box, and Leah Lefkowitz, our manuscript archivist here at Atlanta History Center, will make sure that they are addressed at the end. Are you all ready? Let's go.
Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Horowitz Garcia, and I am the regional manager for StoryCorps in Atlanta. And I'm going to talk you through a little bit about what is StoryCorps, some of the format for today, mostly just how to ask questions, and a little bit about the methods that we're going to use in order to collect your interviews. StoryCorps, you may have heard StoryCorps if you listen to public radio, basically, or if you've taken an oral history class. If you haven't, chances are you may not have heard about us. But StoryCorps is a national media organization that works to help people record, preserve, and share their life stories. We pull from many different disciplines of anthropology, folklore, journalism, and also from oral history. My background is in oral history. I've been at StoryCorps for 6 years. So I'm excited today to talk with you about the different ways that you can record as part of this partnership. Once more, I'd just like to mention a bit about the format. We are going to go ahead and do a presentation. You'll hear from a couple of us as we talk about the different methods, and then at the end we'll have a time for questions. I think the way to ask questions is to post them in the question section or maybe the chat. Leah will be able to find those and get your question out to us. If we run out of time and we don't get to your question, then don't worry, we'll be able to follow up at other times. Next slide, please. Don't play it just yet, though. So I'd like to introduce this. This is StoryCorps Connect. I'm going to talk more about it after this clip plays, but this little clip an overview of what it is, and it serves as the basis for a lot of our remote interview technology. Would you play the clip, please, Kennedy? Thank you. Okay, can we go back to the slides, please? Next one. And next one, please. Thank you, right there. So I'm going to assume that you've not done a StoryCorps interview, so I'll just talk about what we've had before and some of the new technologies that exist. So the base idea of StoryCorps is that it's two people who know each other having a conversation about something that's important to them. From that basis, at the Atlanta History Center, we would have public interview days where people would come in. We'd have partnerships with different organizations, and folks would come in, sit down, talk to each other with a facilitator present, and we would record that conversation. Well, a few years ago, Dave Isay gave a TED Talk, and from that TED Talk, we launched the app, the StoryCorps app. You'll see that over on the left side of your screen. The StoryCorps app is basically, it's the voice recorder, a souped-up voice recorder app on your phone. You download it, it prompts you to go through the process, and you can interview anyone you like face-to-face using your cell phone technology. We both decide how you want to store it, and then you can put it up into the StoryCorps online archive, and it is archived at the Library of Congress as well as available online through the portal at the StoryCorps archive, archive.storycorps.org. And that we've had for a long time. You might have heard the Great Thanksgiving Listen, and where we encourage students to interview the elders in their family over the Thanksgiving holiday. And that has helped us a lot. Now, for those of you familiar with oral history, it may sound a lot like the participant interview, and that's basically what it's based on. But then along came the pandemic, and the idea of two people in an enclosed space talking to each other while seated very closely, it seemed like a really bad idea. So due to public health concerns, we couldn't record, but there seemed like a desire in order to keep that recording going somehow. And from that developed StoryCorps Connect. And that's what you just heard Dave Isay, the founder, talk about. I just want to also let you know that just because you do a StoryCorps interview doesn't mean you're going to be a cartoon. I have been trying for 6 years, and so far I have failed. So if you do become a cartoon before I do, I will be very upset, but congratulations. So continuing on, the StoryCorps Connect is based a lot on the app, but idea is you record a conversation you have with somebody you know, and you do it on your own. But instead of using the app on your phone, what you use is the remote technology of your computer, your webcam and microphone, and connecting through. If you go to StoryCorpsConnect.org, you are able to do that. So those interviews are, at the end of the interview, you can decide whether or not have a discussion about archiving it. It could be at the Library of Congress for as long as there is a Library of Congress, as well as recorded, kept at the online archive. So, but for this effort, in the partnership with the Atlanta History Center, we are talking about a third way of doing interviews for kind of those special interviews, especially with organizations. If you're an organization that has multiple people who you would like to record, the StoryCorps virtual signature interview could be an option. This is not something that at this point is made really to the general public for the most part, but it is just like Connect, a way where two people seated remotely can use their computer in order to talk to each other, but it is a facilitated interview. So the facilitator is there in order to make sure everybody sounds good, to make sure that that what can be heard, to keep track of time. StoryCorps interviews are about 40 minutes long. That gives you enough time to get deep into a story or two, but not so much that you start to get tired. And the last thing that a facilitator will do is listen for clarity. So I think the author Stephen King mentions that anyone in a relationship, whether it's a friendship or a romantic relationship, you develop your own language. You can just say something in shorthand. You could talk about Bob and you both start laughing because you know everything about Bob and the story and why it's funny. Well, if it's archived at the Library of Congress and 100 years from now somebody listens to that, they're not going to know why it's funny. So the facilitator is there in order to say, ask you, tell me about Bob. Paint a picture in words of Bob. What is funny? Why was that funny? Why is Bob important to you? And that's the kind of stories that this format is very good at recording. So with those three ways of recording in the partnership with the Atlanta History Center, those can be kept at made public through the communities page, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Both the app and Connect don't have a facilitator. So they're with you, talking with somebody, and making sure you do the hashtag Atlanta Corona Collective so that it can be found. But in these three different ways, these three different methods, one of them being in person and two of them being remote, well, we hope to be able to gather the stories here in Atlanta that have happened since March. At this point, I'm gonna pass it on to Sue, who's going to talk more about what to record.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're enjoying the webinar so far. We're very grateful to Daniel for all his hard work in helping us put this together. So, as Erica mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, the pandemic, as you all well know, no one knows better than you all, has really presented some interesting challenges for all of us. And my instincts are that you probably, if you're attending this webinar, you probably already know some of the stories that you would like to preserve and make available to document this unique period in our history. But I thought I would maybe just go into a little bit more detail, give you a couple of examples maybe to get you thinking about things. If you think about all the different ways that the pandemic and the social justice movement have affected all of our lives, I don't know about you, but I've got family members that are barely speaking to each other, with differences in political opinions about all manner of things. I have a son who works for Delta, and there has been serious worry about his job. Many of us worry about our jobs. We've got economic concerns and considerations. The pandemic has affected our children. The way that they interact or don't interact with each other, all of the controversies and the worries about going back to school, whether it be virtual or in person, all of the struggles and difficulties with working parents who now are faced with trying to hold down a full-time job and teach their children at the same time at home, healthcare workers, frontline people that are part of our circle of friends and acquaintances, all of these different things are impacting our lives in a big way. We're living through very unique circumstances. Nobody has done anything like this probably in 100 years, probably since the last pandemic that we faced with in the 1917s and 1917-18 timeframes. So just to give you a couple of ideas, for example, when we first began our Corona Collective and reached out to the community to see what they might maybe be willing to share with us, a couple of interesting stories came in, and one of them I kind of wanted to share with you. This would, I think, make a wonderful conversation to have through one of these methods that Daniel's just outlined. The story came through, and this was a written story. And a lot of times we wonder, I work with veterans a lot in the oral history programs here at the Atlanta History Center, and many of them will say, you know, well, I've written down my story. I've written a memoir. I've written these things down, and that's wonderful. But I would submit that there's something very powerful about hearing the voices, about hearing people speak these things and say these things. So this story just kind of touched me. It was a woman who wrote in about her neighborhood. I don't know about you, but many of us, as far as neighborhoods go, we don't speak very much to our neighbors. We don't interact very much with our neighbors. And when the world shut down back in March, that kind of changed because we were all at home. Many of us were trying to get that exercise in and walking around the neighborhood, and we were interacting with our neighbors more than we used to. This was early in the pandemic, back in March, when she submitted this story. And she said that she and her family were outside having a meal outside, and they began singing a familiar church hymn. It was a hymn that was familiar to them. And as they were outside on their patio singing this hymn, they all of a sudden heard neighbors 2 or 3 doors down pick up the hymn with them and join them in singing. And from that, it circled around to another house a few doors down on the other side, and then another house a few doors down on the other side. And she ended up with this wonderful moment that she shared with her family, with so many of her neighbors that she could not see, but she could hear them singing this common hymn. And I thought a lot about that since I read that story, and this idea of the fact that we have much more in common, I think, sometimes than we tend to think. So that was a moment that I think would make a wonderful StoryCorps story, Atlanta History Center Corona Collective story, to share experiences like that in the neighborhood. And apologies for a couple of personal stories here. I don't know how else to share ideas except for things that I've personally experienced. I have a daughter who lives in the Middle East. I have another daughter who lives in Canada. It's been extraordinarily difficult for me to know that they are so far away and that I cannot go see them. Even if I had the financial means to do so, I am literally forbidden from entering those countries because of the pandemic. So that's been awkward. But my daughter shared with me a video that I just loved and thought I would share with you real quickly. Her child is 6 years old and has a favorite school chum from preschool named Lachlan. And when the world shut down in March, Lachlan and his family left Kuwait and went back to their home in Canada to ride out the pandemic. And Emma really misses Lachlan. These are little 6-year-olds, but she missed that interaction. Lachlan is her very best buddy. And so they would Zoom on mommy's iPad. And when they would have their Zoom conversations, over the course of one of those conversations, and you can imagine what those conversations are like with 2 6-year-olds, but over the course of that conversation, they decided they wanted to play hide and seek. And they played hide and seek from 8,000 miles away on their iPads, because mom would tuck the iPad underneath the box or underneath the covers, and Emma would count to 10, and then they would play hide and seek that way. These are unique experiences that none of us have had to deal with before. And I think any way that you can document the things that you're going through. How have your family traditions changed? How have your food ways changed? We all joke about all the banana bread that we baked and the quarantine 15 that we gained. How has that played out in your family? What family recipes have you turned to? Have you turned more to family history? I know a lot of folks have spent this time in quarantine examining their family relationships a little bit more closely and maybe doing a little bit of family history research. How have first responders touched your lives? Have you reached out to your local fire department? Have you or your children developed relationships with the mail carrier that maybe weren't there before? Or the garbage truck, the sanitation workers who work so hard to keep our communities clean? How have those things impacted you? Do you have family members who've been touched by COVID? I have a nephew who was diagnosed with COVID, and we thought we were going to lose him there for a while. When you think of sharing these stories, you do want to make sure that you carefully consider privacy settings. Many of us have friends or associates who have been involved in advocacy for the social justice movements that are currently going on. Some of those activities have put participants in danger. You want to be careful as you share those things, how you share those and how broadly you want to share those. And as Daniel mentioned, there are privacy settings on these StoryCorps conversations where you can be sure to be careful that way. But all of these things, I'm hoping that I haven't left out anything important. Those are just a few things that I jotted down. But those are the kinds of stories that we hope that you'll share with us. How has COVID impacted your life? How has the pandemic changed your life? What things do you hope you'll take out of this pandemic? In our interview guides that will be posted and available for you to look at, it's important to remember that the best interviews, the best conversations are not driven exclusively by questions. Questions are always important to have prepared, but you do want to make sure that these conversations can kind of go in whatever direction that the two of you would like for them to go in. So we do have some questions that are prepared for you that you might maybe want to consider. We also wanted to make sure that you knew that we're certainly interested, the Atlanta History Center is certainly interested in any artifacts or documents or photographs or other things that you think you might maybe be willing to share to complement these conversations that you're having. So for example, the story of the woman who talked about her neighborhood joining in this wonderful singing experience, photographs of the neighborhood might be wonderful to include. The little video that my daughter shared of my granddaughter playing hide and seek with her little friend from 8,000 miles away. I mean, that video might maybe be something you might be willing to share. So there is also information available to you on an email address that you can write to offer those kinds of things for our collections, to see if that might maybe be something that the History Center might be interested in taking. So I'm hoping that and I hope you'll pardon me, I feel like I'm not very fluent here today. This is new for all of us. This technology is new for all of us. And so bear with me as I kind of look through my notes and make sure that I'm covering everything. The only other thing that I thought I might maybe mention is these are conversations that we're having. They're not really traditional full-on oral history interviews. The History Center does a lot of that. That's what we do here at the History Center, our full life oral history interviews. And you can certainly visit our website for some examples of that. The most active collection that we have right now is probably our Veterans History Project, where we do 1 to 2 hour video recorded interviews that we, again, like Daniel said, would normally do in person under normal circumstances. So a full-on oral history interview might be something to consider in the future as well. As you can imagine, we've got limited resources, and certainly with the pandemic, interviewing in person is something that we just can't do right now, but we're looking at other options, we're exploring other options, and we're working closely with the Oral History Association as we determine best practices for that kind of interviewing going forward as we move forward through this. So I hope that's just a few ideas of things that you might maybe be thinking about sharing, conversations that you might be willing to share. But most of all, we just want to know how this has affected you. How has the pandemic affected you? And how has the movement for social justice affected you? How has it affected your family? How has it changed you? And how do you think it will change life going forward as we move out of this time period? So that's about it for me. My contact information is on the screen. I hope you'll feel free to contact us if you have further questions, if there's anything that we can provide you in the way of help to get started with this. And thank you. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Sue. Um, Leah has also posted in the chat email if you have questions about the Corona Collective or questions about the material to be gathered. You can go ahead and email collections@atlantahistorycenter.com. Be sure to turn off your notifications. So let's say your organization wants to be part of this collective, or you want to be part of this collective. There is a sign-up form. And through this Google sign-up form, you can go ahead and give us a little bit of information, contact address, as well as phone number, and a little bit about what you would like to share, how you would like to record, and how you'd like to move forward. In a little bit, Kennedy is going to post a link to that here in the chat, so you can go ahead and move forward with that. Like I said, make sure you include your contact information, how you would like to record, an idea of the number of recordings that you would like to do, or the type of material you would like to share. Know that there on the communities page at the StoryCorps archive, online archive, you will be able to see some of the training videos on how to use StoryCorps Connect or how to use the app. And you will also be able to hear a lot of the stories that we gather through this process. So the link there should be already in the chat. It will be soon. But like I said, if you are not sure how to use the app, if you're not sure how to use StoryCorps Connect, you can find these training videos on the communities page. Erica just posted the link to the communities page, so you should be able to see that. And then a couple other things I do want to talk about is that if you're in an organization, you want to do multiple interviews, and you're just not sure how to move forward, or you have some concerns that need to be addressed, maybe something that needs to be addressed wouldn't be best here in this format, let us know. We can work with you on this. So let us know on the form, and we can work with you and figure out how best to move forward on that. Okay, so if you have questions about StoryCorps, you can always email me at dhgarcia@storycorps.org or atlanta@storycorps.org. Thank you all very much. I'm going to end here today before we move to questions. Moving along quite rapidly, but I'm going to end here. Oh, the study guides. Thank you so much. There are some interview guides for how to move forward. Those are being posted in the chat both by Erica and Kennedy now. With that, they'll give you an idea of some questions to ask and how to go ahead and build the project. So let's end on an inspirational note, shall we? The next slide, thank you. This is Tyrone Hampton and Frank De Jesus. This is an audio card that's going to be played in a minute, so you'll be able to get the good bit of the framework. But I just want to tell you, this was a StoryCorps Connect interview. It was done earlier this year during the pandemic. Both Mr. Hampton and Mr. De Jesus are bus drivers out of New York. And this was recorded really during the middle of the pandemic in New York, when it was at its most intense. And they talk about their commonality of bus drivers and what they see their job is, and mostly how to take care of each other. Kennedy, would you go ahead and play this clip, please?
My father was a bus driver, and he would take me to work with him on days that he had no babysitter. And I just remember I would sit there right by his feet, and he would give me the microphone, and he would tell me, say, Lexington and 96th Street coming up next. So you would hear me in my little baby voice, Lexington and 96th Street up next. And I loved it. I thought it was the best job in the world as a kid. So I'm here because I love the job.
You know, we take a chance every day with snowstorms, traffic, people running in front of your bus.
Through all the trials and tribulations, we do like doing what we do for New York City.
We do. We have a driver's heart.
Yeah.
But now our heart is being tested. And it's one hell of a test.
Every day that we step foot on that bus, we come home with the possibility of not infecting ourselves only, but our loved ones.
You know, we've seen a lot of brothers die, a lot of co-workers lose their life behind this attack.
What gives me the most hope right now, I have a good friend and I see him with a roll of caution tape. And every bus that passes by, he's running in and taping off the seat right behind the bus driver, making sure nobody sits there. So the next bus, I got on with him and I helped him do it faster. And every bus that came on, we did it. You know, once you're against a wall, the only way you could go is forward. I want you to know that you got a brother in me for life now. You know what I mean? If I didn't know it before, I know it now for sure.
We're gonna make it through this, man. We're gonna make it through.
Thank you so much. I've been muted. Um, Thank you all so much for that. Before we move on to questions, I just want to spend a moment reflecting on that um, on that interview. This has been an edited selection of Mr. Hampton, Mr. Jesus, and one of the men talked about how our heart is being tested, and I think that's true for all of us here in the city of Atlanta. Our heart is being tested in many ways, multiple times, and so this effort with the Corona Collective and this partnership is a way we can record how your heart is being tested. But not just how it's being tested, but also, as they said in the clip, how they're taking care of each other. And how are you taking care of each other? And leave some of those lessons for future generations. Or maybe for the current one who needs to hear them. So thank you all very much for this time here. We have plenty of time here for questions. So if you haven't posted yet, you can go ahead in the chat or in the questions format, whatever you would like to know. Thank you all very much for your time, and I'll turn it over to Leah, who can let us know what kind of questions y'all have.
Okay, Leah here. It doesn't look like anything has been posted yet, but we have plenty of time. So feel free to shoot those questions at us.
Leah, it looks like people are posting in the questions section and not the chat.
I don't see any. Am I having some issues here?
Maybe I'm seeing a few myself.
Okay, my apologies.
Problem.
Yeah, go ahead and jump in, Daniel. I'll try to figure this out.
Okay. Well, I'm seeing one from Anthony Knight about African American stories still archived at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. I think that is about the StoryCorps initiative. We have an initiative called GRIO, that's Stories of the Black Diaspora within the United States. Those are being archived at the Smithsonian Smithsonian Institute's Museum of African American History and Culture. So that initiative is going on, yes. And some of these interviews could be added to that as well. The StoryCorps virtual interviews, for instance, could be added to that. The app and the Connect interviews, I am less clear about, but all as Anthony, as you know, but if others may not, that the base archive for all of StoryCorps interviews is the Library of Congress. And I'm also seeing that Grace couldn't hear some of the previous audio. If that's the case, I'm sorry about technology. Oh, Erica has responded. Yes, we'll make sure we can post it. Everything I posted here, you should be able to see at the StoryCorps archive. That's archive.storycorps.org. We also have we have a YouTube channel. So if you ever, my joke is that StoryCorps is the Adele of oral history. If you ever need a good cry, you can always go to the YouTube channel and see some of the animation and the stories there. But the YouTube channel is the animated stories or some of these audio cards. But if you want to hear a much more wider breadth of stories, the online archive is the place to go. I'm seeing from Emily Roberts, can you offer us one more time a step-by-step of how to contribute? Erica, do you want to go ahead and handle that?
Yes. So there's two different ways that, I guess more than two, that you can contribute. If you'd like to send in something to the Corona Collective that is a photo, a video that you took, any objects, you can contact us through that collections@atlantahistorycenter.com email address, and we can set that up. Or you can put it into the Corona Collective form that was through that blog post that we posted in the chat earlier. If you're interested in doing an oral history, and if it's a step-by-step of how to contribute to the oral history, we can set up training with you or with a group that you're involved in if you'd like, and sort of walk you through the different StoryCorps options, again, through that. There's also the training sessions that are training videos, that Daniel mentioned earlier, and we can post those, a link to those in a follow-up email if that's helpful. And I hope that is what you're looking for, Emily. If not, let us know and we will be happy to respond. Daniel, there's a question here from Gabby, and she asks, or they ask that, are two or more people able to interview on StoryCorps Connect, or is that only done through the virtual signature version?
It's both. On StoryCorps Connect, it's 2 people, and on the virtual, it's also 2 people. It's best when it's only 2 people. So that's on both versions. The signature version is where the facilitator is present. That involves more staff time, so we can't do as many in that area. Eric, I'm going to also lob one back at you about, is there a deadline for contributing to the Corona Collective?
Yeah, we do not currently have a deadline. So if this is something that you just don't have the spoons for right now, please feel free to wait and contact us later. Totally understand that a lot of people are feeling the fatigue right now, and you may have something that you want to donate to us, and that collections@atlantahistorycenter.com email is always open, and it will be forever and ever. So if there's something that you think about in a year, in 2 years, feel free to reach out then and we can take care of it then.
And if you keep your eye out, some of the content is actually going to be posted online. We're not exactly sure when, but sometime in the year. So if you kind of want to see other content, just keep your eye out. Go to atlantahistorycenter.com, and on our album page, that will be available sooner or later.
Excellent.
Yeah, sorry, Daniel, I do not have access to the questions.
Well, I think at this point in the pandemic, we all realize that technology is also grand and is great until you absolutely. I am not seeing, I'm hoping I think we answered Emily's question. It looks like we answered Anthony's deadline we got. Oh, spelling griot, that's Griot. And the griot initiative has been an ongoing one at StoryCorps since, I think it's been since 2007. So it continues. All right. All right, well, I'm not seeing any more questions. So if you think of a question that hasn't, tonight at 3 a.m., then by all means, send us an email. Don't expect an immediate reply if you send us something at 3 a.m., at least not from me. But we will be sure to go ahead and help with that. I think Erica made a really good point that if you find this interesting, but there's some stuff you need to square first before you jump in, or you have some concerns, it's fine to wait. It's also absolutely great to let us know about those concerns, and let's see if we can solve them, and let's see if we can go ahead and figure out a way we can move forward. On behalf of StoryCorps, I'd like to say thank you all for coming. I especially want to really thank all the staff at the Atlanta History Center who have put up with me. My understanding is that's not easy. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you for attending. And thank you, Daniel. We love you.
Good night, everyone. Have a good day and take care.
Bye.
Thank you. That was great.